Somewhere between your 60th and 70th birthday, most people start to notice it. Digestion isn't quite what it used to be. Afternoon energy dips lower than it should. A cold that used to pass in 3 days now lingers for 2 weeks. You start to expect it, because everyone tells you that's simply what getting older looks like on the inside. Frank is 80 years old. He spent 40 years as a welding teacher outside Dayton, Ohio, and he'd been told the same thing his whole life. So when his doctor ordered a routine gut bacteria panel last spring, mostly out of curiosity, nobody expected what came back. His results didn't read like an 80-year-old's. They didn't even read like a 60-year-old's. His doctor pulled up the printout twice, because the pattern in front of her didn't match anything she'd expect from a man his age. She'd been practicing geriatric medicine for over 20 years, and she told Frank flatly she couldn't remember the last time a routine panel made her stop and actually study it. If you've ever quietly assumed your gut is just aging on schedule, right along with everything else, stay with me. Because what actually separates a gut that declines from a gut that doesn't has almost nothing to do with the number of candles on your cake. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Frank's results were really showing, and how to start building the same thing in yours. You're not alone in wondering about this, and today we're going to fix what most people have been told wrong. Here's the question that was actually bothering Frank's doctor. It wasn't just that his gut looked healthy. It was that it didn't look like anyone else's. For years, the popular story, the one you've probably heard, is that some lucky older adults simply hang on to a younger gut, as if there's a youthful bacterial fingerprint sitting somewhere back in your 20s, and the goal is to somehow keep it, or get it back. That story is almost exactly backwards. And once you see why, the real explanation is more interesting and honestly more hopeful than the myth ever was. In 2021, researchers at the Institute for Systems Biology tracked gut bacteria in more than 9,000 people across 3 separate study groups. Frank's doctor later told him his own numbers looked like they belonged in that same dataset. They weren't looking for people whose guts stayed young. They were looking for what actually separated the healthiest older adults from everyone else. What they found is that starting around age 40 to 50, the gut bacteria of people who go on to age well doesn't freeze in place, and it doesn't loop back to what it looked like decades earlier. It keeps changing. It becomes more and more unique to that one individual, less like everybody else's, not more like some shared young template. Think of it like this. And this is exactly the shift Frank's panel showed. Most guts in midlife share a lot of the same core neighborhoods, the same recognizable population of bacteria, showing up in roughly the same balance from person to person. It's a bit like most towns having a similar mix of shops on Main Street. But in the healthiest ages, something shifts. Those neighborhoods start rearranging into a combination that's genuinely one of a kind, the way a town develops its own character over decades, not younger. Individual, this wasn't a small study. Either 3 separate groups tracked over years with blood work and health outcomes layered on top of the bacterial data, which is exactly why the finding held up as strongly as it did. Frank's doctor called it the most convincing aging data she'd seen in years. And here's the part that made Frank's doctor sit up straighter. The people whose gut bacteria stayed locked into that shared generic pattern into their 80s especially the ones who held on to high levels of one dominant bacterial family called Bacteroides. Think of it as the same old crowd that never makes room for anyone new had shorter life expectancies, about 4 years shorter on average. Meanwhile, the people whose gut kept drifting toward that unique individual signature were the ones still thriving. Frank's panel wasn't unusual because it looked 30. It was unusual because it looked like nobody else's on record. That's not a coincidence. That's the actual biology of healthy aging, and it's something you can actively build, starting well before 80, and honestly, even if you're starting today. So here's the real open loop. If a young-looking gut was never the goal, what's actually driving this drift toward a healthier, more individual gut? And more importantly, can you steer it? Or is it just genetic luck? Frank's doctor wanted the same answer, and honestly, so did I once I saw his numbers. The honest answer is that it's mostly steerable. Researchers have identified several drivers that consistently separate the guts that keep evolving in a healthy direction from the ones that get stuck. Let's go through them, because 2 of these almost nobody talks about. Driver 1 is dietary variety, not quantity categories. Every different type of plant fiber you eat, leafy greens, beans, whole grains, nuts, different colored vegetables, feeds a different neighborhood of bacteria. Eat the same 5 foods on rotation for years, and you're essentially only ever inviting the same 5 neighbors to move in. A 2020 trial called A New Age followed over 600 older adults across 5 European countries for a full year, putting half of them on a Mediterranean-style eating pattern. The result, their gut bacteria shifted toward exactly the kind of anti-inflammatory keystone species associated with lower frailty bacteria that hold central stabilizing positions in the gut ecosystem, the way a load-bearing wall holds up a house. And this happened independent of the participant's age or starting weight. In plain terms, it wasn't too late for any of them, no matter where they started. This is where Frank's own history gets interesting, because his wife has kept a garden for close to 50 years. Different greens depending on the season. Whatever beans did well that summer, squash in the fall. Without ever calling it a strategy, his plate has been rotating through more categories than most people's for half a century. Driver 2 is what researchers call microbial crowding, when that same old crowd, the Bacteroides group, takes up so much space that it crowds out the diversity your gut needs to keep evolving. Picture a garden where one aggressive vine has taken over every bed. Nothing else gets the light or the room to grow, even if the seeds are right there in the soil. This is the stuck pattern linked to that shorter life expectancy we mentioned. But here's the reversibility, and it's genuinely good news. Crowding isn't permanent. It responds to the same dietary variety behind driver 1. Every added plant category is quite literally opening up real estate for new neighbors to move in, cutting that one dominant vine back down to size. Now here's where it gets interesting. This is the part that made Frank's own doctor pause a second time. Driver 3 is physical movement. Not intense exercise, just consistent movement, most days. Multiple studies tracking older adults have found that regular movement independently increases production of short-chain fatty acids. And the effect shows up even in people who aren't changing their diet at all. Think of these fatty acids as a kind of fuel exhaust your gut bacteria produce as they break down fiber fuel that nourishes the lining of your intestine and calms inflammation throughout your whole body. Frank still does woodworking most afternoons up and down the stairs to his shop, standing at the workbench for hours. His doctor now believes that's not incidental. It may be part of why his results looked the way they did. Driver 4, and this is the one almost nobody connects to gut health: circadian rhythm. Your gut bacteria run on their own daily clock, tightly linked to your sleep-wake cycle. Different species actually rise and fall in activity across the day and night, almost like shift workers clocking in and out. When that rhythm gets disrupted, inconsistent bedtimes, late-night eating, irregular meal timing, the bacterial populations that thrive on regularity start to lose ground, while the less helpful ones get more opportunity to expand. Some researchers now think this may be one of the most underrated levers in the entire aging conversation, precisely because it's so rarely mentioned. We're going to come back to this one, because it turns out to matter more than almost anyone expects. Here's the study that genuinely surprised the researchers who ran it, and it's the piece that ties everything together, the piece Frank's doctor actually printed out a second copy of, just to show him. When the Institute for Systems Biology team dug into what was different in the bloodstream of the healthiest agers, the ones with that unique individual gut signature, they found specific compounds their gut bacteria were producing. One was a tryptophan-derived compound called an indole, essentially a chemical messenger your gut bacteria manufacture and release into your bloodstream, like a note passed from your gut straight to the rest of your body. In earlier animal research, that same compound had been shown to extend lifespan in mice, and I want to be upfront, that's a mouse finding, not a guarantee for humans. But here's what made it more than a lab curiosity. In this human study, people with higher blood levels of that same compound were the ones showing the healthy aging signature. A second compound, one separately known to run unusually high in the blood of centenarians, showed the single strongest link to that unique gut pattern of anyone in the entire study. In other words, the bacteria doing the most work for Frank's results aren't the ones getting attention in the popular story. They're a small set of compound-producing microbes quietly doing chemistry in the background. Chemistry that shows up decades later as either a body that's still adapting or one that's stuck. So, if diet, crowding, movement, and rhythm are the real levers, what do you actually do with that? Let's make this concrete. 3 tools in order of how much they matter. Tool 1. Stop counting servings, start counting categories. Instead of eat more vegetables, aim for variety across a week: a bean, a leafy green, a cruciferous vegetable like broccoli, a whole grain, a nut or seed, all within a few days of each other. That's the exact pattern the New Age researchers saw driving the anti-inflammatory shift. You don't need to overhaul every meal. You need more different colors and categories moving through your gut on a rotating basis. Frank's garden plot habit is really just this, lived out over decades without anyone ever giving it a name. Tool 2. And I want to be upfront that the evidence here is still developing. There's a particular bacterium called Akkermansia, one of those load-bearing keystone species we mentioned, that tends to be more abundant in people with better metabolic health, and boosting it in controlled human trials has been linked to improved insulin sensitivity and lower inflammation markers. Most of the specific food research on raising it naturally, things like cranberry and grape polyphenols, comes from animal studies rather than people, so the human picture is still filling in. But polyphenol-rich foods generally, berries, pomegranate, green tea have a much stronger track record for gut health overall, and they're a low-risk way to hedge your bets while the more specific research catches up. Even a small, consistent handful a few times a week counts more than one dramatic change you can't sustain, which, again, is close to how Frank has eaten without ever thinking of it as a plan. And then there's tool 3, the one that actually surprised me most when I went through this research, because it costs nothing and takes no extra time. It's rhythm. Eating your meals in roughly the same window every day and going to bed within about the same hour each night appears to matter almost as much as what you're eating. Remember driver 4? Your gut bacteria run on a clock. Give them a predictable one, and the healthy aging species get the stable environment they need to keep doing their work. Throw that clock into chaos, red-eye travel, skip dinners, scrolling until midnight, and even a great diet has to fight an uphill battle just to keep up. Frank, by the way, didn't do anything dramatic. No supplement stack, no elimination diet, just decades of a Mediterranean-leaning table, an afternoon in the workshop most days, and, his wife will tell you, he's been asleep by 9:30 and up by 5:30 since before either of them can remember. The robe on the porch rail before sunrise, sawdust catching the morning light through the shop window, coffee going cold on the workbench because he got absorbed in something with his hands, a garden bed his wife has turned every spring for half a century. That's not a health routine. That's just Frank's life. And it turns out his gut bacteria have been quietly keeping score the whole time. So let's bring this all the way back. Your gut isn't racing to look 30 again, and it was never supposed to. What it's actually trying to do, if you let it, is become more specifically, individually yours, a unique signature built from variety, movement, and rhythm. Decades in the making and still very much under construction no matter your age today. 3 things worth remembering. Rotate your plant categories through the week instead of just eating more vegetables. Add a small, consistent source of polyphenol-rich food, berries, pomegranate, green tea, to support the specific bacteria linked to metabolic health. And protect your sleep and meal timing like they're part of your diet. Because to your gut bacteria, they are. Your body has an extraordinary capacity to keep adapting, at 80 and beyond. Frank's results are proof of that, not the exception to it. If this helped make sense of something you've wondered about, consider subscribing. There's a lot more of this kind of myth correction coming. Because there's one more piece of Frank's story we haven't gotten to. That gut clock we just talked about, the one running on his sleep schedule, turns out to work in both directions. It's not just that good sleep helps his gut. His gut bacteria may be helping decide how well he sleeps in the first place, through a signal most people have never heard of. That's next.